Hello, and welcome to our Contractual and Auto Enrolment webinar. There are two ways in which a member can be brought into the Teachers' Pension Scheme. One is through contractual enrolment, which is through Teachers' Pension Scheme regulations, and the other is through the auto enrolment process. Full-time members have always been automatically enrolled into the scheme. For part-time members, anyone who joined the scheme prior to 2007 had to elect to join the Teachers' Pension Scheme, meaning membership wasn't automatic. However, since 2007, any member taking up a new post or who had a significant change in contract as a part-time member were automatically enrolled into the scheme. Opt-outs have also changed over time. If a member had opted out of the scheme prior to 2012, they were opted out of the scheme entirely and remained that way until they opted back in. When the scheme regulations changed in 2012, anyone taking up a new contract of employment after that date, regardless of any previous opt-outs, should be contractually enrolled into the Teachers' Pension Scheme. So when does contractual enrolment apply? When a new employment relationship begins with a member, provided they're between the ages of 16 and 75 and are employed in a role that's eligible to be in the Teachers' Pension Scheme, they should be contractually enrolled into the scheme, regardless of any earnings or previous opt-outs. For example, if you've taken on a new member of staff or an existing member of staff is receiving a new contract due to a change in role, they'll need to be contractually enrolled into the Teachers' Pension Scheme. You must include any eligible members of staff on your monthly data collection or monthly contribution reconciliation files. The member may choose to opt out immediately, but you must include them on your submission prior to this. Where we've been provided with a member's email address or the member is registered for My Pension Online, then we will contact them to give them scheme information once they've enrolled. If we don't have the member's email address and they don't have a My Pension Online account, it's your responsibility to provide them with this information. We'll send a report to you each month letting you know who we've not been able to contact. There's a link within the report to our website. This is the link you should be providing to those members of staff. You'll need to deduct contributions from the member's monthly salary and send them to us along with your contributions each month. It's important that you check the member's status before contractually enrolling the member. This can be completed by downloading a member print on the employer portal. This is to determine if the member has opted out of the scheme prior to 2012 or if they have opted out within the same establishment for all contracts of employment at that time, as you'll need to complete the contractual enrolment template for that member. This can be found on the employer portal and will ensure the correct pensionable status of the member is recorded. Auto-enrolment was brought in October 2012 by the pensions regulator to encourage more people to start saving towards their retirement. Employers were given what is called a staging date, which is the date that they had to assess their workforce to identify any members who were required to be placed in a qualifying pension scheme. This exercise is repeated on or around the third anniversary of an employer's staging date, and as an employer, you have the ability to either delay or bring this date forward by 3 months. From the 1st of October 2017, auto-enrolment is applicable from the day a new employer's member of staff starts work. However, contractual enrolment also applies, which means all new staff will be contractually enrolled. If you're an employer who is approaching their re-enrolment date, then it's very important that you're aware of what your responsibilities are. You must assess and identify any members of staff who currently aren't paying into the scheme. This could be because they've previously opted out of the scheme, or if they're a part-time member who started prior to 2007 with no part-time election. If the member of staff meets the criteria for auto-enrolment, so for example, someone who is aged between 22 and their state retirement age, and they're earning more than £833 a month, then they'd need to be brought back into the scheme under auto-enrolment regulations. As the employer, you must provide auto-enrolled members with information about the scheme and also complete the enrolment template to ensure that the pensionable state of the member is updated to show that they're now in pensionable employment. For example, if you have 100 members of staff and 95 of those are already contributing into the scheme and 5 of them have currently opted out, you will need to assess the 5 who aren't currently paying into the scheme, and if they meet the criteria, you would need to automatically enrol them into the scheme. However, if the person doesn't meet the criteria, for example, they're below the age of 22 or above their state retirement age and earn less than £833 a month, then you don't have to automatically enrol those members of staff into the scheme. You must, however, inform those members of staff that they don't meet the auto-enrolment criteria, but they're able to join the scheme if they wish. There are certain exceptions which affect potential members of the Teachers' Pension Scheme. There may be a time where a member meets the auto-enrolment eligibility criteria, but an exception can apply, which means you won't have to enrol them into the scheme. This could be if a member has chosen to opt out within the last 12 months at an employer's discretion. For example, if your re-enrolment date is the 1st of January and the member has opted out of the scheme in the 12 months prior, you can choose if you'd like to automatically enrol them back into the scheme when your re-enrolment date arrives. If a member has handed in their notice and they're leaving employment with you, you don't have to automatically enrol them into the scheme, and instead you could apply the exception. Finally, if a member of staff holds a valid tax protection certificate, which is in relation to lifetime allowances, you don't have to enrol them into the scheme either. Further details can be found on the Pensions Regulator's website, a link to which is on this slide. There may be occasions when a member meets the criteria for auto-enrolment, but due to overriding teachers' pensions legislation, they're not able to be brought into the Teachers' Pension Scheme. In these circumstances, you must place them in an alternative pension scheme, such as, for example, the local government pension scheme. This can apply where you have a part-time member of staff who's under the age of 60 and who retired on the grounds of ill health prior to the 1st of April 1997. The other occasion when you will have to provide an alternative provision is where you have a full-time member of staff who also has an additional part-time post as well. Under the Teachers' Pensions regulations, a final salary member can only have a pension accumulated on their full-time post. If they have an additional part-time post as well, you'd need to provide an alternative arrangement for their additional part-time post to be paid elsewhere. If the member falls under the career average arrangement, they can pay pensions on both positions, so their full-time post and their part-time post as well. For non-eligible job holders, so members of staff who don't meet the criteria, you have to monitor these members of staff, and when they do meet the criteria, you would need to automatically enrol them into the scheme under the automatic enrolment regulations, unless one of the exceptions applies. All members have the right to opt out of the scheme at any time if they wish. There's no restrictions to the amount of time they can opt in or out of the scheme. If a member does want to opt out of the scheme, then there are 2 ways they can do this. The first is through their My Pension Online account, and the second is by downloading a paper form from our website. The effective date for the opt-out depends on when you received the opt-out form. If you receive an opt-out form within 3 months of the member being either contractually or automatically enrolled, then the effective date of the opt-out is the date they were enrolled into the scheme. For example, if a member was enrolled into the scheme on the 1st of April and you received the opt-out form within 3 months of that date, the effective date for the opt-out would be the 1st of April. If you received the opt-out form after the first 3 months of the member being enrolled into the scheme, then the effective date of the opt-out is the 1st of the following month. For example, if a member was enrolled into the scheme on the 1st of April, but you didn't receive the form until the 14th of August, their opt-out date would be the 1st of September. If you've taken deductions within the first 3 months, then it's your responsibility as the employer to pay those contributions back to the member. You also get your employer contributions back as well. If you receive an opt-out after the first 3 months, provided the member has less than 2 years' service altogether within the scheme, they can apply for repayment of those contributions. This repayment would be made by us, and you as an employer wouldn't pay the contributions back in this case. Once a member has become an eligible job holder and they opt out of the scheme, You don't need to monitor them until your next re-enrolment date. It's really important that any member who is eligible to be in the Teachers' Pension Scheme must be included on your monthly data collection or monthly contributions reconciliation file. This is in compliance with the scheme regulations, even if they opt out of the scheme. This is because, as an employer, you have to provide information for anybody who's eligible to be in the scheme, regardless of whether they are paying contributions or not. In summary, you need to contractually enrol any members who begin a new employment or have a change of contract and include them on your monthly data collection or monthly contributions reconciliation files. You'll need to re-enrol any eligible job holders who've opted out of the scheme and who you're not applying an exception to on your next re-enrolment date. You'll need to write to all affected members and provide them with scheme information. You also need to monitor non-eligible job holders and auto-enrol them if they become eligible and an exception does not apply. You also have to complete the enrolment template when you have a member of staff who is opted out and they're either being contractually enrolled or brought into the scheme under the auto-enrolment criteria. If you're on the new monthly contributions reconciliation process, then the auto and contractual enrolment process is incorporated within that, so you don't need to complete a separate enrolment template. You need to identify those members who require alternative pension provisions. You need to keep auto-enrolment records for a minimum of 6 years as part of the pensions regulator criteria for auto-enrolment. Under the Teachers' Pension Scheme regulations, there isn't a time limit for how long you need to keep this information. It states that as an employer, you're responsible for providing information to us in order for us to administer the scheme. However, it doesn't provide a timescale for that, so that's ultimately down to you as the employer to decide how long you retain these records for. Finally, prior to each of your re-enrolment dates, you have to complete what is called a Declaration of Compliance and submit this to the pensions regulator. We hope you found this webinar useful. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to give us a call, then our employer number can be found on this slide. Alternatively, you can write to us using the address on screen. All other contacts can be found on our website, a link to which is on this slide. Goodbye.